Now Taxes is 100% free when you file in the TurboTax app if you didn't file with us last year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, just do your own taxes in the app by 2/18.
What if I have lots of forms?
All good, all 100% free.
What if I had 3 jobs?
Still 100% free.
What if I once saw Bigfoot?
That has nothing to do with taxes, so still 100% free.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Now this is Taxes. See if you qualify in the TurboTax app. Excludes TurboTax Live, must start and file in app by 2/18.
Hi, this is Milton Justice, and you're listening to I Don't Need an Acting Class. The sermon for today is going to start with a thought that I had called Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. Okay, first of all, I would say this. Respect the questions that you first ask at the beginning of your work. I mean, you have to really know that the second you ask a question, you have begun to work. And there's no right question to ask. You should really just say, okay, I'm reading this, I have this, I've read about this guy, I've read about this woman, and this is a thought that I have. Now, you may not be able to answer it right away, but it is your thought. It's almost like it's your contribution. And everything on YouTube and documentaries, all of that, are from the point of view of the filmmaker. I mean, when I was making documentaries, my researchers, Prue Greenblatt Prue and I spent, weeks talking about what is this a film about? What is this a film? What are we saying? What are the questions that need to be asked? What is our point of view? I mean, you do so much research before you start writing questions. It's also, I think, true with acting. I mean, it is the reason I like the idea that you let things kind of simmer around in your brain. You bring in all of this information. However, that first thing you ask is important. If everybody were working on the same part, you would all ask different things. You just would, because you're different people. And so the joy, by the way, is that we do have YouTube and we do have Google. I think nowadays there is no excuse for actors not to have some idea what they're talking about because of YouTube. I mean, really seriously, as my students used to say about me, and he used to lick postage stamps. I mean, we went to the library. I mean, it's like you had to meet the people in order to do the research. I mean, if you were doing a play or as we did a documentary on women in prison for homicide, you had to do research. You had to go to the prison. You had to meet these women. And so everything that you talked to them about was from your point of view. Okay, so YouTube is limiting, but it's brilliant. It's limiting to the point of view of the interviewer. But think about it in terms of, this is what I know about the man, and this is a piece of information I'd like to know, because I want you to really get an idea of what it means to have a complex human being, what it means to have a character that has multi-dimensions. The other thing is, and this is an important thing, as you begin to, here's what I think is workable. I look at the facts of the play. And maybe it's helpful. Sometimes I need it, sometimes I don't, but maybe it's helpful to ask questions. And the questions are not complicated questions, as in the case of Dr. Sackheim. Raphael asked a question, I wonder what it must have been like when you were 10 years old to have to leave Germany. Well, that's such a logical question. Now, here's where you have to be careful. You have to understand when you do not have enough knowledge to answer that question. You have to know that you cannot go to this rather limited perspective you may have on life. And certainly you can't go to the limited perspective that you have from watching movies on the subject. What you can go to, and this is important, is you can go to what we call in acting the given circumstance of your play or the world of your play. And this is really important. First of all, it is a brilliant question. What does it feel like to be 10 years old and leaving? Well, first of all, he answers the question in the first half hour of the show interview. But the point is, you could never figure that out based on your own experience. At all. You're not a 10-year-old Jewish kid in school in Berlin when Hitler comes to power. In fact, you have to be realistic and even say, I can't even imagine what that must be like. I have so much work to do as an actor to figure out what that must be like that it's sort of like I can't do this part this week. And that's where we have this particular joy of YouTube. When I was a student, you would have to have gone to the library and just buried yourself in books about it. You would have had to dig through New York. Well, digging through New York to find a Holocaust survivor would not have been difficult back then. But, I mean, it's like you would had to have done all of this work in order to even get a glimmer of that. And this is really important. If we're not careful, we come up with, I'm sorry, but your life and your experience is not enough. I'm not going to say you're boring, but I'm going to almost say you're boring. It's like you have nothing to compare. And the fact that our frame of reference is movies. When Chris Petrovsky was doing Madam Secretary, and after they decided to bring him back from the dead, he hadn't died after all. He was part of a prisoner exchange. The director, Eric Stoltz, who is also an executive producer, who was an actor, of course, said to Chris, I want you to do research about Russian prisons. And he said, do not watch a movie on it. You can watch a documentary or you can read a book, but do not watch a movie. I mean, it was very, very smart. And so Chris got a copy of the Solzhenitsyn book, which was only 800 pages. I think he read 200 and got the picture. But also you have to understand that it was a moment on this series where he had no dialogue. I mean, he had no dialogue at all. And so what he brought to the table was this kid getting out at the border of Finland and Russia and crossing over the border, having been in a Russian prison for 8 months. And I have to say, I knew it was coming. I found it very, very moving. I mean, I was really amazed. In fact, what's her name that had the lead in Madam Secretary? Tia Leone. Saw him in the makeup trailer because he was very carefully having the makeup person put on the bruises and put on this kind of dark and lines and sort of things. And Tia said to him, I think that they probably would have fixed him up for this prisoner exchange. And he said, I don't think so. I think they grabbed him out of the prison cell. He had absolutely no idea why, and they threw him in a car. And she paused and she said, you've got this covered. But I mean, but you see what I mean? It's like, this is what you have to do. You have to cover it. Look, often you have to be, to me, part of the talent is being able to sit back and say, I cannot answer that question. I have to do something else. So sometimes asking yourself a question is only saying, I wonder what that's like. What you cannot do is assume that you know. You cannot assume because you've seen a movie about the same subject that you have any idea what it was like to be a Jewish kid when he was 9.5 years old. And his mother said, there's a rumor they're going to take away all Jewish passports. We have to leave. So it's like, how could you know that? You could know it if you'd done a massive amount of research. You could know it if you understood the world that he's in. So I have to know all of that in order to even remotely come up with what does my character feel about it? And I just want to point out, this is the joy of the work. It really is. At the end of the day, you will know more about this subject than anyone you've ever met. And I mean, that's truly the fun of acting. So here's the thing. Just keep this in mind. If you start to rely on your own life, you are going to be way too limited. Who you are is going to be helpful in figuring out your road into the part that you're playing. Your life experience will help you figure out what you need. But you have to know what your life is and what their life is. And I'm not saying your life is pedestrian, but we write plays about a heightened sense of conflict. I mean, the events that we're taking for the characters that we're building are heightened events. They're moments of conflict. They're moments of something happening. And in life, there is not always something happening. So, I mean, that's the thing. We have an enormous luxury when we're doing a play. But also, the problem is, if you continue to think and come up thinking at your imagination and coming up with ideas of what it must be like, and it's uneducated, then it's just not going to be interesting work. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Some of you look at the character and, man, it just starts rolling. You start to see her. You start to see what she's like. You start to understand that. And then you reach a point where you can't answer the question. And you say, all right, so now let me go to the social circumstance. Now let me go to the world that she lives in. And maybe that will give me something else. And this is the thing. And I think all of these discoveries we're making in class are important. I think it's really important. What all of you are discovering is that you continue to layer on from the information. It's like there's a piece here, there's a piece here, there's a piece here, there's a piece here. I mean, you can see how you can, work on these things forever. But you see how when you're shopping, you hear something, you hear a half an hour interview, and out of it, you pull usable actor stuff. You say, oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. And you start to pull it all the time. You start to figure out, what can I steal from that? What can I steal from that? So, I mean, this is the joy. To me, this is the joy of research. The joy of research is that other people's lives are more interesting than mine. That's the reason I say truth is stranger than fiction.
Hi, everybody. It's Walker Vreeland. I'm the producer of I Don't Need an Acting Class with Milton Justice. Director of online media is Evan Solers, and music is provided by David DeJuice. If you have a question or comment you'd like Milton to address on an upcoming episode, email us at questionsformilton@gmail.com. Again, that's questionsformilton@gmail.com. And if you like the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks so much for listening.